Hi, everybody. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live. I'm Miriam Briskin, and I'm here with Mike, and we're so excited to be with you today. I am the small business team lead here at Unanet, and we're really excited to come together today and do lunch with you. So I come from Unanet as a teacher for many years, and I came over, oh my goodness, about 5 years ago, and really just jumped in, very curious about government contracting, and immediately became very passionate about helping small businesses succeed. And I really, really, really love the small business community. I'm on the membership committee at CCAF and just love getting immersed. And I'm very well known to be an avid networker. So if I haven't met you, I hope to meet you soon and just absolutely love the small business community.
Thanks, Miriam. And I'm Mike Souza. I am the leader of our small business team here at Unanet. Been with the business for about 3 years at this point. My background is in not only GovCon here, but also highly regulated industries, specifically healthcare. I've spent a lot of time in space where organizations are dealing with compliance, with challenges across the board in terms of their process, and really want to lean in today on some of that. So Miriam and I are here for the next 30 minutes plus or minus. Really, when you think about how we're going to spend our time today, we know that government contractors in the SMB space are really the backbone of federal contracting. We also know you're facing unique challenges. We also know those challenges can feel overwhelming at times. So really, when we think about using today as kind of a logical transition or reset moment, the beginning of the government fiscal, we know it also comes with uncertainty, some doubt, and some new challenges, things we haven't experienced, things we've experienced in various capacities, et cetera. We're hoping you spend our time today with us, leaning in, getting some key takeaways, but most importantly, to Miriam's point, we really hope to carry the conversation forward with you all. So today, we think about connection. Sessions like this are really about how we ultimately continue to support and build the SMB community across the GovCon space. You're going to hear some real experiences. We're going to share some of what we're seeing other GovCons do and what's working. And ultimately, our goal is to continue to help build this community. We are going to provide our contact information at the end. So as we continue today, we want you to think about continuing by reaching out to us, having continuous conversations with one another, and really driving the SMB space for the government contracting vertical a little bit forward. Think really through three main areas today. One being the criticality of setting up your infrastructure as an SMB GovCon proactively rather than reactively. We want you to also think about ensuring you have adequate visibility into your business through data, and ultimately thinking about how you scale and grow in the months, years, et cetera, to come. Must put in a plug here. This is a very tight-knit community. Miriam and I are both fairly visible, really looking forward to networking and connecting with the attendees today. Referrals are critical to us at Unanet and helping to continue out the SMB GovCon community. So please, by all means, feel free to share with us any information you have around other GovCons that could benefit from Unanet. But at the end of the day, we created our small business team specifically to help smaller firms scale without the complexity of overhead and enterprise systems. So think of that kind of as the underpin of all of this today. We are going to host a raffle. So each and every time you post a comment in the chat, we'll grab your name. And for each time your name is posted, you'll be entered into a raffle, which we'll post results for a little bit later on.
Yes, and that raffle is super exciting. There might be lunch cards. We're excited. We've never done a raffle on a LinkedIn Live. So the purpose of the raffle is also for engagement. Even if you're a Unanet customer or an amazing Unanet partner, we'd love to hear from everybody and kind of, get everyone involved today and just continue the conversations. And, obviously raffles are really exciting and fun. So I wanted to kind of jump into, Unanet in general, really, as we're speaking with lots of small government contractors, we're always thinking about what your challenges are and not just solving those challenges, with our solutions, but also understanding your business. As, Mike and I and the team, as we're having all those conversations and really digging into challenges, we noticed 4 overarching themes of kind of what we're hearing from you all lately and kind of what we're hearing across the board. I wanted to talk a little bit about those challenges and just kind of what we're hearing. So the first thing that people dig into us when we have these calls and really want to understand the challenges that you're facing is infrastructure pain. So oftentimes when we meet, especially with small government contractors, they're kind of, ready to grow, but they're stuck on outdated tools. So they might have, QuickBooks and spreadsheets. They might have point solutions for timekeeping. They might be generating reports in Excel with trying to figure out their indirect rates somehow with, so there's a lot of different things we see, and these amazing massive spreadsheets often where people are just trying to figure out how to keep all their data secure in one place. And I think about infrastructure kind of like building a house, and we often kind of explain it like small GovCons are often trying to build a house on sand, and they're trying to create this foundation that's not steady. So, really thinking about your infrastructure as being a solid foundation and creating that concrete base so that you can really build your business and have a strong foundation. So, thinking about how you're spending your time behind the scenes with administrative tasks, it's often not real time, and organizations just don't really understand the full picture of their business, which kind of leads into growth roadblocks. So, they're trying to juggle a lot of things, and there's a lot of administrative overhead behind the scenes, but they don't really know kind of, where they're headed because they're using their time, potentially on more administrative things. So they're often, chasing RFPs, looking for things, but they don't have kind of a solid foundation. So this is important if you're thinking about creating a revenue stream and building credibility, with teaming partners, with other primes if you're subcontracting, and showing them, we do have the ability to kind of meet your needs and have that sophistication. So, we're seeing that GovCons are losing valuable time, and that's what's really creating those growth roadblocks for them. Then I kind of want to dig into compliance a little bit here. This is a huge one, and we're noticing it's only continuing to get more mandated and have more compliance and complexity. Obviously, Unanet really helps with DCAA and making that a very simplistic process, but there's DCMA, there's CMMC, there's all kinds of, security and just mandates. One of my favorite things, and I tell this to people, is Rich Wilkinson, shout out for one of my favorite people, who used to be at Unanet, but just very well known in the industry. He said, you could be compliant with a shoebox and sticky notes, but is that really how you want to run your business? So I thought, that was really eye-opening for me, because when I meet and talk to a lot of small businesses, they're like, yeah, well, I'm DCAA compliant and I've been, pre-approved and I'm doing this. And yes, compliance is something that you can do, and you can kind of have a different hodgepodge of systems, but are you also operationally efficient? And is this something that you want to do by just taping things together and having, more time? So that's definitely a huge challenge, just trying to be compliant and checking off those boxes. But when you're checking off those boxes, you also want to do it in a smart way. And then I would say all of these things kind of lead into cash flow pressure. So organizations, especially in the small business world, they're lower revenue. They're trying to figure out what's next. How am I going to grow my business? How am I going to get, the next? A lot of them are on the edge, ready to be a prime contractor. They're going in for those, amazing opportunities. But, if you're not able to really budget and forecast and see that work and see what potentially that's going to look like, that can cause a lot of stress, because, a lot of people are often trying to budget and forecast and figure out things, in spreadsheets and things, it can just get very complex, and they don't really know where they're headed, and not seeing a clear picture, into the future with their revenue projections. So these are some high level kind of, I would say the biggest challenge areas that we're seeing. Very curious, and not seeing many comments yet, but what are your current, or I guess, what's the biggest challenge for you today? What's something that it's really on your mind, whether it's the uncertainty of what's happening, but even a step past that, once the uncertainty kind of settles for your business, what is the biggest challenge, and what is something that you're looking to tackle? So feel free to put in the comments, and, we're excited to kind of hear about that. And we lean into these challenges to help you. So turning it back over to Mike here, he's going to talk about how Unanet helps.
Thanks, Miriam. And yeah, just to reiterate what Miriam said, we'd love to hear some commentary around, out of the things that kind of we mentioned, what you feel you're struggling with most today. We know it's probably a little bit of all of it, but certainly prioritization is critical and important when you think about how you're going to solution or solve for some of these things. So we would love to hear from you. A lot of times, one of the things that we hear, or I should say most consistently we hear, is we're going to wait for the right time. However, we often ask how we're defining what the right time is for an SMB GovCon, and that often becomes a challenge or very disparate in terms of a response. So Unanet does really have a subset of recommendations that align with the challenges Miriam spoke about. Our goal is to help small businesses solution and solve for today, but also prepare for future, prepare for scale, prepare for growth. So really, when you think about why partner with Unanet and why now, there's a couple things that stand out. So number one, Miriam mentioned from an infrastructure perspective. Our recommendation is that you set your foundation early and you plan for that growth proactively rather than reactively. That's the name of the game. The GovCons that we see most successful are the ones that are planning for scale. They're the ones that are building the foundation on concrete rather than on quicksand. So thinking about making sure you have the right tool set at inception is critical and important. Data-driven decision-making. So tying it back to roadblocks to growth, it's very hard to forecast and plan out a strategy if you don't have adequate data that captures your entire project lifecycle. So you really want to be thinking about, as you lay that foundation, also how you're organizing a central place for working and aligning all of your processes so that your data follows throughout the lifecycle. Compliance, again, Miriam highlighted this, but when you think about the impact that compliance can have to a small business, or better yet, the lack of compliance can have to a small business, our goal is to enable you with the process and tools that ultimately have things baked and built into your day-to-day operations, so you're not scrambling when an audit shows up, when questions arise, etc. Again, proactivity is the name of the game for small business GovCons. Predictability, having that visibility into your projects and your people so that ultimately you can do a better job of planning, forecasting, and ultimately protection of your margin. It's really key and critical to be able to have that data and insight. And our goal is to, like I say, enable you for scalability by setting that rock solid foundation so that you can start to expand. You can start to think about things like joint ventures, multiple entities, how you're managing your subcontractor business, ultimately so that you have a tool set that's going to help you continue to maintain flight rather than ground you when it's important. Miriam's got a great example of a customer that, I asked her to share the story, really leaned into the analogy of why not to kick the can down the road. So I love Miriam to kind of share that perspective from the customer side.
Yes. So we reached out to a company that had spoken with us before, and they were interested in Unanet. Just that, they just didn't have the timing, to kind of move forward at the time. So a couple of years went by, and we reached out to them again, and they said, you got us at the perfect time because this is a great time for us to really be thinking about our infrastructure. So he said, we'll probably either move forward now or we're going to kick the can. And we get that saying a lot, of kicking the can. So we had a lot of fun with this. And I said, you know what, let's jump into a call. Let's do an evaluation and I'll help you understand, your specific business case. Every business is so different. So it's really kind of digging in, asking them a lot of questions, understanding where they currently are, understanding what their process is, what their problems and challenges are, and then what their goals are is something that we really are excited to do. And so we did this and we had so much fun with the kick the can pun. I said things like the can get heavier, right? The manual processes and disconnected systems. You could trip over the same can. You can do repeated invoice work, charge code errors, timekeeping issues. The rust never sleeps. You can have outdated tools and they're only going to get more brittle, harder to support. You can't kick your way to compliance. There's going to be delays, and not having compliance baked into your system is going to be difficult. You may run out of road, by the time you need to do multi-entity or having subcontractor needs, and then there's going to be potholes ahead. So without automation, indirect rate errors, and accrual mismatch and things like that, it's going to definitely, make issues with your journey. So had a lot of fun kind of showcasing those kick the can analogies. And, we also use something that we have called an impact calculator to really dive in and figure out, okay, what is the actual business case if you stay where you are today, or, let's say you kick the can and let's say you continue to kind of operate the way you're operating. And we were able to show, based on our research and our case studies and things that we've seen from customers, exactly, the answer. And what we're finding that's really interesting is if you do kick the can, you're actually losing not just dollar, equal to time, but you're also losing the value of driving your business forward. So it was just a really exciting way to do, their evaluation. We had a lot of fun with it, and I can say they're excited to be a new Unanet customer. So they are on board now, and they're not going to be kicking the can, and they're going to be leveraging themselves to be proactive and, make themselves more competitive in the market by not kicking the can. So I thought that was just a fun story because, ultimately we can always wait, having a system like Unanet is change. And, if you're making a change, there's a lot that goes into that decision. So we're here to help you and lean into both scenarios, and find out when is the right time for you to make a change and what that change looks like exactly. And the small business, community and department, we're really excited to help the small businesses have the tools they need.
Miriam, thank you for that. That's awesome. Couple things to call out. So we have a couple questions in the chat. The first one, Adrian calls out, is around with new administration changes. She saw a company lose their contracts and basically had to start capture all over. They felt frantic. And how do you deal with asking someone to slow down and refocus in the midst of contract cancellations and gov contract losses? So, I have a couple of thoughts there, and we'll ask Miriam to chime in as well. So planning for scale and growth is the name of the game. Again, while I'd like to say pipeline solves all problems, I won't directly say that. I'll say pipeline solves lots and most of problems oftentimes. So having the foresight to plan ahead for what could potentially happen and making sure you're actually capturing not only the right opportunities, but also enough opportunities to be able to pull from and continue to drive your strategy is critical. Number two is frantic is a scary word, right? So when you think about how someone reacts to that, you think about if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So thinking about slowing down to mitigate the franticness there and leveraging your data by having a system that, again, captures an end-to-end process, you can start to peel back the layers of that onion and make data-driven decisions that may not be the same decisions you would make had you not had that data accessible to you. So Miriam, I don't know if you have any other thoughts, but I think in the interest, Adrian, of what you posted, the real key is mitigating that franticness, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I agree with everything Mike said. I think, there's been a lot going on this year, and, we can't shy away from the difficulties that we've seen, with Unanet customers and just across the board. So I think it's really important that we validate this is, it can be very difficult when you lose something that, that was going well, or, this was a great contract. So I think, giving each business owner time to kind of, allow them to kind of reshift, right? And I always say, like, kind of redirect. So instead of, doing something that you were doing or working with someone that you were used to working with, you got to learn to kind of step outside of, what could be different and what could be new, and who else can I talk to now, and how else can I kind of diversify. So there's a lot of small businesses that are getting, really, just learning how to navigate and kind of where to next. And I think, we're very much excited to kind of help you all think about kind of leveling up and kind of refocusing that. So I think it's really important to also kind of, you mentioned, Adrian, thinking about capture all over again. At Unanet, we've really listened to our customers and kind of what they need. We do have an integrated CRM solution that allows them to really look at their pipeline and capture exactly what they're doing and have a sophisticated go, no go process. So I think, leaning in, and I think we've had a lot of amazing discussions about growth this year and why that's so important to have a full view of your pipeline. So really just focusing on what's ahead, what's in the future, what am I looking towards? And I think the whole idea of being proactive versus reactive, there's a lot of things that we can't control and we're not going to be able to change, but there are lots of things that you can do, and just kind of leaning into what can I do to really set my business up for success. And I think this also goes into another question I saw, from Kathy. She said, as Miriam mentioned, we can't seem to get everyone out of the habit of using external expansive Excel spreadsheets. We need to learn to use Unanet and its full potential to pull information from the system. So Kathy, thank you so much for bringing this up, because, that kind of goes into that next idea of tracking indirects and just automating rates. There's so many small businesses that are living in Excel. There is Excel. I mean, you can definitely run QuickBooks and have Excel. And I think a lot of companies do run in QuickBooks currently, but there's a lot of challenges around what you're doing because you're also manually having to do a lot of things. So, I would say if there is, obviously I am come from a teaching background. I really love Excel. I love the control I have. I can change the cells. I can really do and manipulate things and control a lot of things. But there's also a ton of error that could happen if I key something incorrectly, or just if I'm trying to calculate something and it calculates incorrectly. So it's really important, I would say, for those people to have a conversation with us, allow us to show you kind of some of the automation that you could have. And, really we can connect your business case to exactly what, and really what we do is, we ask you a little bit about the types of reports and things that you want to see. This reminds me of another story of a company I worked with. He said, Miriam, I just want the ability to, every Friday, just go in. I want to have a Friday health check. Like, where is my business? How is it doing? I don't want to have to wait till the end of the month when the books close and everything's processed to see how much cash do I have? What's going on? So, I said, and they're currently a Unanet customer now, but at the time they said, I said, not only can we do a Friday check, we could do it anytime, any day, get a pulse, that real-time information, instead of having to go into Excel or, getting it from somebody else. You're going to know as an organization where your business stands and what the health is at any time. So I think that is pretty powerful and just, important to call out. I also think that as you're thinking about the next fiscal year, aligning your operations with your growth goals and connecting everything is going to be important. So be thinking about, your new hires, who you're going to be partnering with, maybe what your subcontract strategy is. If you want to talk about JVs or teaming partners, but really there's so many ways, and the community is extremely vibrant with a lot of organizations that are willing to work together. Understanding we still have the rule of two. So there's a lot happening that we can really lean into and align our operations, with tools that allow us to dig in. We have one called GovIntel here at Unanet where you can actually see and who's on the platform and ask to team with them. So there's a lot of ways to do teaming and just kind of continue to connect. And, networking is essential. And I think it's just so powerful. So if you're somebody who's not already out, attending conferences, doing things in person, whether it's CCAF or any organization out there, highly recommend that you get involved. And, I think I want to kind of wrap up this talk track with talking a little bit about vendors. So there's a lot of vendors out there. And I think what's really important is that you are working with vendors, like Unanet, that are a partner. And a partner is, I think, for me, much more than just a software vendor. It's someone that's really going to care about you and your business and help you succeed and help you with your goals. And I think that, especially with small business team here, we really understand the complexity around small businesses. And, we're happy to help you, work with payment structures or things like that you need, because we know every business is different. And we've been behind the scenes, especially this year. We're very open to feedback on, what you need to do. And we just really want to make you feel empowered to have the tools that you need. So I would say Unanet is very much excited to really get in, like Adrian said, or Kathy said, let's get these small businesses out of Excel and let's power them to be proactive.
I love, Adrian, your follow-up in the chat there in terms of the time to put a system in place is when the sun is shining and not when it's raining. And that's a fantastic analogy. And really appreciate that commentary there. Just kind of layering a little bit deeper into what Miriam said around partnership and vendor. There's a lot of noise in this market, right? There's a lot of organizations you can trust with your business. There's a lot of organizations that are going to be asking you questions around how they help you continue to grow. Unanet's been there, done that. So as the leading SMB provider for GovCons, it's critical that you think about your strategy and partnership as one that'll help you grow your presence in the GovCon space. So really that's where we lean in as an organization and start to differentiate ourselves around things like user groups, experience portals and knowledge center accessibility, but also things like weekly knowledge sessions. So the ability to get on with your peers on a routine basis, continuously week over week, and have topical discussions around things that are impactful to your process, impactful to your results. We can help facilitate a lot of that. We do it consistently. Again, it happens week over week. But really, when you think about a partner, you really need to think about making sure you lean into an organization that's going to support you, not nickel and dime you, and ultimately help you drive your success concurrently. So appreciate that opportunity to call that out. Something that Ben just called out in the chat as well is, he says, as a finance person, we always want our spreadsheets. Something we've been working on is using Unanet as a repository and source, actuals and forecasts, and then bringing that data set into Excel for finance and others. In this way, we get the best of both worlds. And I think, Ben, you called out the important part, right? Having that central source of truth is critical and important so that you always have faith in the data. And then how you export and manipulate it certainly is up to org strategy, process, et cetera. But I think that's a great call out, having a central source of truth that you can confidently rely on as you look into those decisions. So I know we're coming up on time here, and hopefully people have had some nice lunch, and we've certainly appreciated the opportunity to talk with you all. We'd love to keep the dialogue open. You see both of Miriam and my contact information on the screen. Very reachable via LinkedIn, all of the above. More than happy to continue the conversation as things progress. But thank you all.
Yeah. And I would also encourage you, if you're not sure what Unanet is, or you just want more information, please set up a call with us, as we love having introductory calls just to get to know you and your business. And, and I think, it's different for everybody. So I would say the first step is just having those conversations, letting us know what your challenges are. And ultimately, we're here to help you. I also want to do, just a shout out and thank you to our Unanet customers as well. And just really, it's just been the 5 years I've been here, and kind of just the stories I've heard and just how amazing you all are. Just want to thank you for everything you do and all the feedback that you provide, and continue to give us that feedback, as we're always looking to improve our products and our services, and we really just want to make sure that we're continuing to grow our community. So thank you to our customers, thank you to our partners, and thank you everybody for joining today. And we're excited to do a raffle and post the results, and we can't wait to hopefully meet you online or in person.
Thanks, everyone.